We are now moving into the fourth session of the day. And you may have noticed that since morning, we've been talking about different aspects of how can we improve economic growth in Pakistan. And regardless of what we've discussed, we have always kept people at the heart of the solution. And that is what the next session is all about. People are a nation's competitive edge. Our next panel is about, it's actually a dialogue on developing a national HRD strategy. And for that, the panel members are Syed Zulfikar Abbas Bukhari, Minister of State for HRD and Overseas Pakistanis. Andaleep Abbas, MNA and Parliamentary Secretary for Ministry for Foreign Affairs. Khalid Awan, Chairman, Transam Group. Syed Asad Ali Shah, Chairman, Pakistan Refinery Limited. Faraz Khan, founder, Seed, and visiting professor in Social Enterprise and Innovation, St. Mary's University, London. A round of applause, please. And the session will be moderated by Sajid Aslam, Country Head, Pakistan, ACCA. Thank you. In terms of time, we have about 48 minutes for the panel, including the Q&A session.
Assalamu alaikum, and thank you for joining us today, and thank you to fellow panelists for being here. I think we will be running like 12 minutes is the cut at the time, so we will try to cover it in a different way and a little quickly. I think from a agenda perspective, it's the most important thing is first understand what the HRD, a national HRD we are looking for, and then come up with the overall strategy that how we're going to deliver that. So to start with that, I think we will start with you, Mr. Zulfi, that being responsible from a government side on HRD, how you see that agenda and how you link it with creating the 10 million jobs and strengthen the labor market narrative in a PTI manifesto. So what is your view and how you see that agenda shaping up right now? English. Your call.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum to everybody here. First and foremost, we have around 1.5 million youth per annum, which comes into a working age. So meaning over, in the next 3 years, you're looking at around 4.5 million just over the next 3 years. Of unemployment coming in if you don't provide them jobs. So hence the vision of the Prime Minister Honorable Imran Khan is to create 10 million over the next 5 years, which will gap this or give potential to this overwhelming sort of unemployment potential that's coming. In my personal opinion, and जो मेरी मिनिस्ट्री में काम हो रहा है वो इस चीज़ पे हो रहा है कि हम फोकस कर रहे हैं, बल्कि जिस पे अंदलीप साहिबा भी बहुत मेहनत कर रही हैं और इन्वॉल्व भी हैं, वो ये है कि वोकेशनल एंड टेक्निकल ट्रेनिंग। मैं समझता हूँ कि जो लफ्ज़ है एजुकेशन, उसमें ख़ुद एक एवोल्यूशन आया हुआ है अराउंड द वर्ल्ड, और अनफॉर्चुनेटली पाकिस्तान उसमें काफ़ी पीछे है। द टर्म एजुकेशन हैज़ इवॉल्व्ड। ज़रूरत है हमें कि जो एजुकेशन का जो लफ्ज़ है उसको हम फिर से री एग्ज़ामिन करें कि उसमें कौन कौन सी चीज़ें आती हैं जो हम अभी वोकेशनल और टेक्निकल ट्रेनिंग कहते हैं जिस चीज़ को, वो क्या अब इस वक्त वोकेशनल टेक्निकल ट्रेनिंग है या वो सिर्फ या वो एजुकेशन में इन्वॉल्व होनी चाहिए टू ब्रिज दिस गैप। क्योंकि इफ़ यू लुक एट द टिपिकल लॉन्ग टर्म सिलेबस ऑफ एजुकेशन और हायर एजुकेशन, इट्स वेरी लेंथी and it's very difficult to get youth to come onto it and then participate it through to the end. So we have to re-examine our education system. We have to focus on vocational and technical training. और हमें ये भी एग्ज़ामिन करना है कि कौन से जब आप वोकेशनल टेक्निकल ट्रेनिंग की बात करते हैं, आपने देखना है कि 5 साल में कौन से ऐसे स्किल सेट्स हैं जो इस्तेमाल होंगे और कौन से ऐसे हैं जो ऑब्सलीट हो जाएंगे, जो इस्तेमाल भी नहीं होंगे 5 साल बाद। तो ये ना हो कि हम 3 साल से एक ऐसा इकोसिस्टम बनाना चाहें एक पर्टिकुलर स्किल सेट के लिए जो शायद 3 या 5 साल बाद हो ही ना या ऑब्सलीट के अपने शेल्फ लाइफ के आखिर में आ रहा हो. तो इसकी आइडेंटिफिकेशन सबसे ज़्यादा ज़रूरी है. दूसरी चीज़ ये है कि मैं समझता हूँ कि इसमें प्राइवेट सेक्टर का बहुत बड़ा हाथ है. एक गवर्नमेंट, एक तो पहली बात यह है कि स्कूल्स इतनी जल्दी बना नहीं सकती इतने ज़्यादा कि हम उनको एजुकेट कर सकें, तो उसमें प्राइवेट सेक्टर की ज़रूरत होगी. वोकेशनल ट्रेनिंग हम इतने बना नहीं सकते कि उसमें भी हमें प्राइवेट सेक्टर की ज़रूरत होगी. So we have to get the combination right between the public and private sector in order to work on HRD in the 21st century. ये बड़ा लाजमी है. Third चीज़ ये है कि हमारा जो इकोसिस्टम है उसको हमें इन्वॉल्व करना होगा. फोर्थ इंडस्ट्रियल रेवोल्यूशन, उसको हमें अंदर लेके आना होगा इस इकोसिस्टम के लिए कि वाकई टेक, रोबोटिक्स, ये सारी चीज़ें जो बाकी दुनिया में स्किल सेट, अभी ब्लॉकचेन की बात हो रही थी, AI की बात हो रही थी, डिजिटलाइजेशन की बात हो रही थी, ये सारी चीज़ें ऐसी हैं जहाँ दुनिया उस तरफ जा रही है, तो हमें उनके लिए एक सर्विस प्रोवाइडर बन सकते हैं. तो रादर देन हम जस्ट लुकिंग एट अनस्किल्ड एंड सेमी स्किल्ड वर्कर्स, हमें ये देखना चाहिए कि हम अपना एक्सपोर्ट मैन पावर भी कैसे कर सकते हैं या यहाँ से एक्सपर्टीज़ कैसे इस्तेमाल कर सकते हैं. दैट्स प्रॉब्ली द फोर्थ इंडस्ट्रियल रेवोल्यूशन इन डिजिटलाइजेशन which Pakistan, like India, needs to pick up on. So these are the lower hanging fruits, or the ideology which we have to kind of work towards in order to fix this gap that we're getting. And it's a very high gap. We have to understand it. 1.5 million people a year is no joke to fit into the remit. So I think that the 10 million figure of employment that the Prime Minister has given is absolutely accurate, and that's where the government has to follow these paths. But a lot depends on it. जो पाकिस्तान का अभी मौजूदा जो structure है वो थोड़ा सा may not be the best one at the moment. It needs revision. HRD comes under me, but NAFTAC and TEFTA actually comes under the Education Ministry. So even that in itself is a little bit of a confusing environment. NAFTA has to do a lot of work. NAFTAC, TEFTA has to do a lot of work, which they are doing now. पहली दफ़ा मैं ये भी बता दूं कि हमने एक पहली दफ़ा NAFTAC के साथ एक MOU अभी साइन किया इंटरफेस का कि कितने वाकई स्किल लोग हैं पाकिस्तान में. They only produce, they only have around 3,500 institutions, I think, around the country, which is just not enough, and it doesn't produce enough people. So increase of that, I think NAFTAC has the most important role to play in this.
Thank you. So vocational and technical training is the one of the area which we are looking forward and looking for the public-private partnership, leveraging technology. And Leap Sahib, coming to your side, is you've been involved in a teaching as well. You have a very close connection with the students, the current one as well, and you are managing the foreign ministry. You are part of that foreign ministry. How you see, like Zulfi Bukhari mentioned, that rather than looking only on the Pakistan side, we should look outside as well, where we can provide that type of skill and technology or technical skill. So what's your view and the role you can play in that overall HRD strategy formulation at this stage?
Sajil, when we are talking about a national human resource development strategy, so it begins with the end. And we as a government, like Zulfikar has shared with you, we have a very clear vision. PTI is based on development only and mainly through human development. We have a very clear agenda. Any development that is not based on human development is not sustainable, right? So that's the end. Now, in that end, we have to have a national HR strategy, and Zulfi and I have been discussing it a lot. What I feel is that, and since I've been in the corporate sector, I keep on, I repeat the same thing. It applies on the government level as well, in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Ministry of Overseas, all ministries as well. The 3 Ps that we require. One is, of course, is it a passion? Or is it just lip service? Number 2, the purpose behind it, why we are doing it, what we are doing for. And the number 3 is the planning implementation part. Now, these are all 3. We have the passion. The Prime Minister and the ministers are absolutely convinced this is the path. But then we have to convert that into 3 areas. When we talk about HRD in the government, HRD is only the semi-skilled and the technical workers. When we talk about HRD in the corporate sector, it's about the professionals, right? But they all play a part. So what we are looking at, and when we are in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, we see the best doctors, the best engineers, the best bankers going abroad in the world and getting absorbed in the best countries. Yet, there is a huge demand now coming for skilled workers all across the world. And there's a gap between what we are producing and what the world wants. What we are producing and what the corporate market wants of Pakistan. And we need to bridge that gap. So that's where we are looking at, because you can have the best, and a great vision without great people is a nightmare. A great plan without great people is irrelevant. So that's the problem with us, that we have the best talent in the world, but it's in bits and pieces. So the national HRD strategy, what I would recommend, and I've been recommending, and I've been talking to Zulfi about it as well, first of all, the corporate sector and the professional sector need to have a National Institute of Human Resource Management. Just like you have APTMA, just like you have Pakistan Engineering Council, you need a body of human resource professionals who can work with us, with Zulfi, me, everybody, because we need to legislate on this. I'm a legislator. So I look at the American model and I see that with Trump, the HR community is working to change the legislation. So if you want more women in the workforce, you want more women in the corporate boardrooms, you want more facilities for people, equal pay, the pay between the CEO and the pay between the lowest level, huge difference. If you want legislation to bridge that gap, that body has to interact with us and be part of the National Human Resource Development Strategy. So that's the first challenge that I feel, that we need to have a professional body, and all of you are sitting over here, I'm sure you'll be able to help us in that as well. Second very important part is the skill building that he talked about. We're really struggling with that. Pakistan, like he said, we have about 3,557 training institutes all put together. We need about 200,000. We need about 200,000 to fulfill that gap. And then the type of skills that we need. That's what we need in the end. The National Human Resource Development Strategy should be an apex strategy, which should come up with the type of skills, capacities that we need, and working together with the government. That's most important. Once we come up, okay, we have 3 categories: the professional skills, the technical skills, and the general skills. The drivers and the PNs, and then the technical skills, the IT guys, and then the professional skills, the professors and the bankers. So we need to identify the whole pyramid of the national HRD strategy, which fits in with the dream and vision of the Prime Minister of producing so many jobs. Because until and unless it is integrated, it will not yield sustainable results.
Thank you, Andalip Sahiba. I think it's important when we are talking about the strategy and we are talking about this overall direction. So we do take a little bit stock that where we stand today and what are the strategic imperative at a national level. Khalid Sahib, you are dealing with one of the largest logistic backbone in Pakistan as TCS, as chairperson of TCS, founder and chairperson of TCS. And you are touching almost 1 million people on an everyday basis on a different touch points. So what's your view? What are the strategic imperative at a national level once it's come to the human resources you are dealing with?
Ji, thank you very much. Well, I think the tone that Ms. Andalip has set resonates very well with the human resource challenge at a national level. And when we talk of a human resource challenge and the issue at the national level, then we go beyond just the employability, just the education, or just an industrial. The aims of, at a national level, the human resource development policy of the most progressive countries of the world today, and some of these policies are very recent. They aim at improving and harmonizing the lives of all segments of the population. Of course, the most important and critical are the people who are starting and who will affect the future. But living in harmony and living productive lives. And some of the most progressive human resource policies that have come in very recent times, the most recent in the last 2-3 years, I think one of the good examples is Japan. In the year 2016, the Japanese cabinet approved a policy which they called Society 5.0. And that aims at integrating all the activities right from the beginning all the way through at making the life of people more productive and easier. So this kind of activity then spans across all sectors of life and many ministries. I would have hoped that the present PTI government, which is a very people-centric, and I think I would have hoped to see a dedicated Ministry of Human Resource Development, and because the extent of the challenge is so vast. Now, let me just explain the extent of the challenge. There's a very beautiful song sung by a young singer called Arib Azhar. And he, in that song, which is, I think, titled, Mere Desh mein hai imkaan bahut, aas aur imkaan bahut. Mere desh ke hai imkaan bahut, umeed, aas, arman bahut. He has in that beautiful 3-minute song, if you get to see it, has encapsulated the urban setting and the kind of a society that we have and what kind of a shortcomings and how it could be better. But mostly he focuses on the street children of Karachi. And then I saw a television documentary where a television journalist had gone right into the interior of the country. And in some very deep interior, he's interviewing 10, 11-year-olds. And these children, when you look at them, they look at the energy and look at the spark in their eyes. I mean, these are the children who have, many of them have the potentials of being Dr. Salam. Many of them have the potential of being fighter pilots and great icons. But they are deprived by the facilities that are not available to them. And the questions he asked them, he said something about the geography of Pakistan, they didn't know much about. Then they asked him, do you know how was Pakistan founded? Who founded the Pakistan? Those children didn't know. And then he asked them, do you know who is the Prime Minister or the President of Pakistan? Those children didn't know. But they were playing, and then he asked them, how do you think it is all this learning? And he says, Allah, that's the only thing. Now that is one of the great wasted potential of our country. These children, if harnessed, can be the real wealth, because today the real wealth of a nation is not the amount of oil deposits or the gold deposits you may have. The real wealth now is our human resource and how well we can train and polish it. So I think this is the imperative. But this kind of an activity, first of all, engaging those youth. And once you engage them, how do you engage them? And there are technology today, there are many methods of doing it, but then what do you tell them? And today the Minister of Education was here and I heard him. He had a very good grasp of the whole issue. And he also hinted that, you know, we should somehow, there are 3 different education systems in the country. There is the madrasas, there is the public education, and then there is the private education. Now all those 3 strands have to be connected. There has to be there has to be one national discourse, a national mission. It's very important. That's something that we should all agree on. within the scope of our beliefs and within our systems and our plans in life, but there should be one singular thing. And I think when we come to the strategy of it, that is most important. The National Human Resource Strategy document should address, A, how are we connecting to them? We can't connect to everybody today. What do we tell them? Okay, and how do we take them forward? The ultimate is, you see in the UAE, they have got a Ministry of Happiness. There's a Minister of Happiness. Now that is the ultimate. When you've achieved all those, and then people have then started living lives, then you go beyond just the basics to further improving the quality of their lives and their productivity.
I think, thank you, Khalid Saab. And I think that's great, the very inclusive approach where we can talk about the work ethics, we can talk about the civic responsibility, integrity, objectivity, caring attitude, and above all, hope. And hope is the one which drives the society in a different way. So from a human development perspective, I think this hope, optimism, and then the work ethics, that's play a big role in parallel to when we talk about the technical skill side of it. So that's bringing me to Asad Saab, to your side. You are interacting with the youth, you are interacting on a different policy framework and the forums as well. And you are working in the industry and you have seen the public sector to a certain extent. So if we ask you, in your opinion, the quality of human resource available in Pakistan and going forward, when we talk about the strategy side of it, and if we think in the perspective of CPAC, when there's a more integration is going to happen with the China, so how it's going to impact, starting from what we have as a strategy today, or do we have one, and what quality it's producing, and how the integration with China will impact us further.
Thank you, Sajid, for that question. And I must also appreciate, I think, having this conference, Pakistan Summit, on focusing on developing people, because I think Pakistan's biggest, I would say at the moment, weakness is also our human resource. We have huge population. The fifth, fourth, sixth, now we are going to be fifth largest, perhaps, even crossing Brazil. So fifth largest country in the world. But in terms of human development and various indices, you know that we are virtually at the bottom of the country, bottom of the world, not only on an overall basis, but even when you compare Pakistan in the region, we are now, in terms of our ratings in education, in health, and different rankings, we are really in a worse situation. And I think we all know that in this day and age, we had earlier, the earlier session was on digital economy and digitization. But how can you have digitization and compete in the world when our literacy rate is less than 60%? The minister, I think somebody talked about 60%, but actually in the last 10 years, unfortunately, it has gone down from 60% to 58%. So in this day and age, in 21st century, when we are talking about robotics and artificial intelligence and all that terminology, if 42% of our population is illiterate, and let me also give you a quote on this aspect. 2000 years ago, Plato said that the difference between an educated person and an uneducated person is the same as that between a living person and a dead person. So you imagine that 42% of our population, but I mean, this is also defining literacy in a very loose manner. If you look at the actual number of people who can actually read and write and communicate, do basic maths, etc., I think the number of illiterates will be probably there. We are a country where majority of the people will come into that. So I think the biggest challenge for us to compete, whether it is CPAC whatever with this world is we have to enhance the education and skill of our people. And what I would like to say to, and one was happy that, the current political party and the PTI, which is in the government, their focus was people and human resources, and this was the difference between when you compared them with the other political parties, because the previous political party was in love with infrastructure, with bricks and mortars, whereas we heard from PTI that they are in love with people. They want to bring a change for the people. But unfortunately, so far, 8 months have gone. 8 months is a very long time, by the way, because you only have 5 years, and soon first year will be gone. We do not even have a strategy. And I think one of the takeaways I would suggest from this conference, we should generate some ideas. And one of the proposals that I would suggest to the Honorable Minister and Madam Andalib, the parliamentarian, that please at least think about developing a human resource, human development strategy for Pakistan. You see, there are too many and we have to, when we are developing this strategy, we need to analyze why we have failed to deliver. I mean, we know that the situation is bad. So what are we have to do a causal analysis in developing the strategy. Why we have failed to deliver? Every government has been talking about education. Every government has talked about, that education is an emergency. Skill development is an emergency. Everybody talks about it, but what have we done? And why we are in this state, and how can we change? So we need a holistic, first of all, at least we should have a workable strategy, human development strategy. I mean, forget about the results. In the last 72 years, I have not even seen a human development strategy. So I think I was expecting from PTI to develop at least in the first 8 months, or maybe I think in the next 4 months, let's say in the first 1 year, I think it will be a great achievement of this political party if we can come up with a comprehensive but simple, human development strategy, obviously focusing on education, skill development and training. So that should be one of the takeaways. And of course I can go on and on this, so I'll stop there. The first thought I would suggest is that, in order for our country to develop and take our people who are largely living in 19th century, 80% of our population is living in 19th or early 20th century, we need to have a strategy to develop them.
Thank you, SSM, and we will come back for the further comments, that particularly like in the context of 18th Amendment, how we can develop that integrated strategy, and that would be one of a key outcome if we can bring something out on this one. But that's bringing me to Faraz. Faraz, you are an impact investor, you are a social entrepreneur, and you are also delivering lectures in London as well. So given your view and experience, how you see the talent and the absorption equation working in Pakistan or around the world? We will come back to what the talents require, because every country may have a different one, but how that equation should be working and how those verticals should be created. So what's your view around it?
Thank you, Sajid. The challenge with having is being on an esteemed panel and being the last one is that majority of the good points are taken by these wonderful people. But let me make an attempt. I have been fortunate to actually experience a different kind of educational system in Pakistan and abroad. I came through this Pila school education system, जिसमें पीला कुर्ता शलवार हुआ करता था, and I did my matriculation from there. Then went to a private school, a university, and then went to London and studied over there. So have experienced firsthand what happens. Things have changed further. In some cases deteriorated, some cases improved. And then, by the virtue of being one of the largest impact investors in the country, we work a lot with youth. And there are some learnings. First of all, I would like to pick up from what Asad has just mentioned. I, in detail, went through the SARS policy and the Stability, Growth and Productive Employment policy and the manifesto of the government. First of all, congratulations, because for the first time, there seems hope. There's fantastic intent. But there are certain dichotomies that I kind of identified, and it is a constructive criticism that I hope you guys would take as. Number one, in both of these documents, which are quite recent actually, intention is brilliant, but like Asad said, the human resource strategy should have been a fundamental. And the data supporting that somehow is inconclusive. And all your employment policies and frameworks needs to have a collaborative and integrated approach, which at least our analysts and ourselves, we could not kind of gather. So it would be great if we could actually have a conversation on that, at a later stage. The second bit is the supply and demand equation, very simple. So we have got 1.4, 1.5 million university kids coming out. The public and the private sector collectively absorb kitna percent kar rahe hain. Achieving employment rates of, let's say, 10 million employment aapne generate kar diya. If you look at the UK model, I'll give you a very small example. UK has identified industries, agri-industry, tech industry, creative economy industry. Creative economy industry? Yes, they did an absolute amazing research, and they found out that 5% of the GDP contribution in the UK's economy comes from the creative economy, Fanoon Latifa. And that's 60 billion pounds. They employ 1.3 million people. Now, that's the size. They have understood what is the economy size, what is the state of that particular economy, and what is the way forward. And that's how they're moving, that particular mini economy, which is contributing to the main economy. Now, I think, in my humble opinion, we need to actually take a community-led approach in order to assess, like Khalid Saab mentioned, the Society 5.0 model, in which what are the needs of education and status of education in rural areas, in Punjab, in Sindh, in various provinces? What is the status of the bottom of the pyramid education systems? And where do we need to go? Not only for our internal consumption, but where are we benchmarked against the global supply chain, global human resource supply? Because unless and until we look at that picture as well, we would always be kind of engulfed in our own circle and never look at how can we contribute to the global economy. The last bit is basically a very small part, but it is not a small part. The HRD strategy, or SARS, or the Stability, Growth and Productive Employment, needs to have mental health as a very critical part of the policy of our youth, of our urban youth, our rural youth. What are they feeling? There are a lot of suicide rates that have increased in up north. Why? Now, unless and until we actually focus on mental health and make that an important part of the national HRD strategy, I think it will be incomplete. The second bit is the disability inclusiveness. Now, when we talk about employment, we talk about education. How come these two, major important part of our communities and societies are not a part of that? So that's just my two bit on.
Thank you, Faraz. So if I just summarize, and then I'll open the floor for how we're going to build that strategy in the context of 18th Amendment. The agenda is basically distributed among multiple departments if we come from a government side. And then number one, what is the forum where that strategy can be formulated, number one, and then how it can be executed in a transparent way where the public, who is a major stakeholder in that, they can have a visibility. So just to summarize the conversation we had, there is a mental health conversation, the hope you mentioned, the work ethics and the integrity and objectivity we discussed, vocational and technical trainings we talk about as one of a key priority, public-private partnership, that's a very encouraging side, technology side of it, and then definitely the benchmarking and the performance. So given that if these are the things which we are discussing right now on the agenda, and primary education and the fundamental education, which is a constitutional right, that's basically a fundamental thing. So given that if these are the key pyramid, or these are the key pillar for the strategy which we are trying to drive, which is leading to some economic well-being for the person, as well as the hope and the we call about the caring attitude side of it. So now I open it, what we can do as a forum which can have a very integrated approach to deliver that strategy, and number two, what would be the mechanism where we can have a transparency around the execution. And if we look at all these things, what are the 2 or 3 things which we should pick and talk about it, which we can deliver in the next year, 2 years, and 10 years? So how we can really put those priorities there. So I'll open Zulfi Bukhari from your side to how you suggest that the forum, the transparency, and the 2 or 3 key areas which we should pick for a strategy delivery.
First of all, some very good points, some very valid points as well from all the panelists. The first and foremost thing is that when you dissect a topic when you're trying to dissect a topic, you can take it at all lengths, and to give a social infrastructure impact. I mean, Pakistan gives like 2.2% and 0.9% towards education and health. I mean, that's the lowest in the entire region, let alone in the world. So it's right at the bottom. So you can't have all of a sudden, growth, and when we're talking about a holistic, happy sort of society, when you're living off 2.2 and 0.9% of your GDP towards your social infrastructure. Obviously, the easy answer is we need to increase those numbers and in health and education, and then those departments need to then have a trickle-down effect towards the various aspects that were covered. But most of these things, especially when we talk about skill-based, and when Faisal was talking about employment outside of the country and what's going on in the world, Pakistan needs to obviously, and as a ministry, we are completely changing our approach to that, and we've now taken a demand-driven approach. We've created 5-member cells with various countries where we are now working on where is that country going on, where is Qatar going in the next 5 to 10 years, 15 years, what's their approach, which areas of society are they, or in development infrastructure are they working on, and then we reverse engineer backwards, and we make sure that Pakistan is prepared for those next 5, 10, 15 years. So I think the international approach, when it comes, has to become demand driven rather than supply driven, which unfortunately it always was. We were getting away with the easy times of having unskilled labor going out to GCC countries. That's now unfortunately coming to an end. So we need to up the ante and think for ourselves and actually have skilled workers that are based, the skills like I've at the very beginning said, that are based on demand driven, which will be used rather than become obsolete. I think forums, when it comes to, I think the one syllabus, when Sir mentioned about having one syllabus across the board, I think that is the starting point in my opinion. I'm not the education minister, lekin मैं समझता हूँ कि all the way through that has to be the first implementation. I've done it in my OPF schools, where we're creating a one syllabus all across all the country for all the various OPF schools. It's impossible that all we've done or managed to do in the last 70 odd years is create a gap, and a gap in society because people are having different syllabuses to study. In England, Faisal touched upon in England how they, for employment, but you got to understand, in England, your only decision is, are you going to a public school or a private school? Your decision isn't are you studying metric, A levels, O levels, FSC. Now there's a couple of other new ones as well. That's not a decision that a parent or a child has to make. You just decide that do you have money to go to a private school, or do you have money to go to a public school, or do you not have money to go to a public school? So these are the only two decisions that a society makes, which is a complete different ethos in your mind that you have when you're going towards educating a child, and your whole, when we talk about the happy element and all of this, because it reduces the more issues a human being has to think about, more stress level there is. It's a general thing. If you have A and B, it's a very easy decision to make. So I think in my approach, again, not being the education minister, my approach would be कि एक syllabus होना चाहिए, पहली चीज़. दूसरी चीज़ मैं फिर से ये कहता हूँ कि, and again I'm not trying to sound repetitive, लेकिन the term of education जो हम इस्तेमाल करें, that needs to come into the 21st century. It's very important we redefine that. Yes, one of the elements is having one syllabus, but there are various other elements of what we classify as education today. I think at the end discussed it that education is very different all over the world, and what do we really determine between a literacy rate and a non-literacy rate. So these things have to move into the 21st century. I'll just answer for PTI, and Dilip Saiba might want to as well, but when it comes to the human resource strategy, there is a strategy being formulated. It has taken longer than it should have, there's no doubt. But, we need to realize that we've come into a 70-year-old system. Jahan voices were silent for so long. Now all of a sudden everyone has a voice. And we have to deal with it, which is great. We only wish that these voices were there 70 years ago, and especially in the last 2 decades, that we had as many forums and as many voices and as much critique. Perhaps the governments that have left us with what we're left with would have started to work a bit better if they had the same sort of critique that Alhamdulillah the PTI party gets to face. Unfortunately, the critique in between somewhat was sidelined and there was very few voices. I think this is the first government that is, like Faisal said, that we've given a plan, and it's been well appreciated abroad, and I think across the board. Lekin it's not the most perfect plan. It needs improvements as we go along. Lekin at least this transparency कि हम यहाँ कुछ करने आए हैं. The SARS policy may need more work, as he's mentioned. Absolutely, we need more people like him to join in. And Dilip Saiba at the very beginning opened up the floor कि कौन हमें मदद कर सकता है in this thing. You have to understand. Like I said, it's how far you dissect it. Do I now try to put the onus that we have a capacity issue in the country? The capacity, if you look at all our, when you don't see a country grow economically with high level of unemployment. It all goes together. When a country is doing well economically, unemployment lessens. This is a natural thing. The same way, you don't do corruption by just destroying, just by filling your pockets. Corruption is destroying all the elements in every single department. That's corruption. Corruption isn't that someone made money on a particular infrastructure project. Corruption is the only way you can do it in my ministry. If I want to be corrupt, the only way I can be corrupt in my ministry is that I choose a corrupt secretary, I choose a corrupt DG, I choose a corrupt MD. I can't just do it single-handedly. So what do I have to do? I have to destroy my entire institution. So when you are destroying an institution for decades, and you finish destroying it for decades, and all of a sudden, forget PTI, I'm just hypothetically speaking, a new party comes in who decides that they're anti-corruption, they're left with this crumble of basically filth that you've built up over the years, that the previous governments have built up over the years. Now, unme se hum kaun chune ki ji ye sach hai aur ye corrupt nahi hai aur ye nahi hai, you're just left with no capacity. So it's not only in one department, it's across the board. Whoever thinks it's in one department is absolutely mistaken. It's a corruption of morality across the board. That stems into all parts of social society, let it be unemployment and what have you. I don't want to take everyone else's time, so I'll pass on. So anyways, I think these things are the most important things which we are tackling day and night.
No, thank you, Zulfi. And
I just like to add to what Zulfi is saying, and thank you very much for your comments. I completely agree with them because I've been on that side as well. My take on this, all these suggestions is, yes, like he said, there is a policy, but that policy needs to be strengthened. And guess what? Like we say, it's very easy to build a new building, but it's very difficult to try building something which has been systemically destructed. We are in a government which has systemic, by design, destruction. And so, for us, 8 months, as you say, and I agree with you, in a corporate world, 8 months would be 3/4 of the year over, and then you have year-end results to be given. But in our case, let me tell you, even facts and figures that you're asking for, having a new survey, because even the surveys are rigged. Even the data is rigged. And they don't know how to do the survey. The survey itself, to do a human resource survey, and we've initiated many of them, will take at least 2 years to come up with the right data and the right figures. So that's one problem. Second, even in the corporate world, and so many of you are sitting from the corporate world, and I'm from that corporate world as well, and I would like to say that human resource needs a paradigm shift, not just in the government, in the corporate world as well. I think there's a lot of lip service when you say that human resource is the most important resource. I have been on the other side, and I remember when I went to the CEOs, and sometimes when you give a requisition that, okay, your computer, for example, has to be upgraded, and you give a requisition of ₹1 million, and there is a system that you need to upgrade it with, he signs it. You go to the CEO and you say, okay, this guy needs to be upgraded because his knowledge is out of date, and okay, not $1 million, but 100,000 training course, and the CEO has a heart attack. Are you familiar with this?
yeah, no, I think
Yeah, so I'd just like to say that it's still in our part of the world, even in the developed corporate sector, it's not an investment, it's a cost. Because computers are reported in the balance sheet as assets, people are reported as cost in the profit and loss statements. And until and unless we don't change our systems, what he just said, the systems just doesn't mean that, you know, IT systems. We need to change our financial systems. We need to change a paradigm where we as corporate sector, individuals and the government work together. And I would like to appreciate Zulfikar on this because I've suggested something, the answer to what you're saying. I came to him and I said, we need to have an HRAC, Human Resource Advisory Committee. And we need the best brains in the human resource of Pakistan to advise us. And he said, go ahead. So we'll be very soon getting the HREC together, the best brains over here, and they'll be helping us toning up our policies, strategies, and everything. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Asad Sab from your side, yeah.
Let me just give you a few suggestions, you know, what have worked in Pakistan. First of all, as I said, coming back to this situation, we know that, and Prime Minister has been saying this, that 22 million children out of 50 million children, school-going age, are out of school, right? And those who are going to school, majority of them are actually not learning. The outcomes are very, very pathetic. So obviously talking about 21st century skills is a big deal. There is a strategy paper that there is an education committee of a corporate group that we'll present to you, as per which we have studied the education system of Pakistan. And we believe, and I believe, that existing system of education has not worked and it will not work. Why? I mean, for the simple reason, first of all, जैसे आपने कहा कि resources की कमी है, 2% of the GDP education पे लगता है, it needs to be increased. But even that 2%, 700 or 800 billion rupees that is spent in all the provinces and the federal government on both normal education and skill development, 70–80% is wasted. The reason is that most of that money goes to the teachers. And the government teachers, as we know, in Punjab, there are 50,000 schools. In Sindh, there are 40,000 schools. And the system is such that one secretary education sitting in Lahore or Karachi, there is no way he can manage and ensure better outcomes, you know, in 40,000 schools. It has to be school-based. So that's why London Economist carried out a survey in 2015, and there's another one, and there was a lead story. They covered Pakistan, India, and many other third world countries, and they concluded that education in public sector will not work. And Pakistan is a classical example. No matter what you do, the education system will not work, you'll not get the outcome. And they said that one of the best systems which is already available is Punjab Education Foundation model. And now in Sindh also Sindh Education Foundation model. The difference is, let me just give you an example. In Punjab Education Foundation, your per child cost is 700 rupees. And in the public sector, the cost per child is 2,000 rupees. So it's more than, you know, double, 2.5 times. In Sindh, it is 800 rupees for SEF and 3,500, by the way, for the public sector. So more than 3 or 4 times the cost. Still, the outcomes of PEF and SEF, when independent testing is done, is double than that of the public sector. The reason is that these organizations, this is public sector, SEF and Punjab Education Foundation are also public sector, but these are outcome based. You know, these are public-private partnership models, government funding and private execution. So what we are saying is, we are a very we have a huge problem on fiscal side. We don't have too much money. We have to get better outcomes from the existing money. You can get these children who are out of school and provide better education by using Punjab Education Foundation model and Sindh Education Foundation model, providing a subsidy of 700 or maybe 1,000 rupees per child. And you know, and this system works because private sector, it develops the entrepreneurship also, and you only pay them when there are outcomes, when there is enrollment, when there is attendance, and when the results are better. Whereas in the public sector, you have hundreds of thousands of teachers who do not go to school, or if they go to school, they do not teach, or even if they do, they don't know how to teach, and many of them do not intend to teach also, they do other jobs. So there is absolutely no way you can correct this system. So if you really want better outcomes, or really want delivery, I think we already have these systems. We have to reduce the government even otherwise.
Thank
and
you,
this applies to all sectors. So cut the government, do public-private partnership, and you know, do a management which is outcome-based rather than input-based.
No, thank you, sir. I'll bring Khalid Saab and Faraz very quickly, briefly. Anything which you feel that is a key pillar for our strategy. There are things which are already said, so if you can add on those. Khalid Saab, starting from you.
Jim, very quickly, I just want to take the advantage of the presence of two very senior members of the government, and just very much from the heart. The issues are there. We recognize the issues. The fact that you are there means that you have to be bigger than the issues. And problems loom large where men don't. And issues are there. And you also have now at your disposal an array of tools which were not previously there. The tools of communication is a great tool. Today you can reach and say, and then what you have, the present government has in the person of the present Prime Minister, his personal charisma, his appeal, his effectiveness, his ability to reach right to across the cross-section of the people. You know, with the right narrative, he can shape a whole new thinking of this country. We heard this morning the national anthem. Everybody stands up for the national anthem and says it from the heart. In the corporate world, when companies deal with very complex issues, we draw up what they call a mission statement. In a mission statement, in a 3-4 liner, we say who we are, what we want to do. First, who we are, must define. What we want to do, a value system of how you will do it. That simple thing then defines, makes everything else clear. And I think you, the team and the government today, with the leader that you have, and with the short time that you have, because time flies so quickly, I think I would very much appeal to you to have a national narrative that is across the board. The madrasa child accepts it as much as the students of LUM. This will be a common narrative, and that has to be articulated and implemented. Thank you.
Thank you, Khalid sir. Faraz, anything you want to add?
Thank you. Yeah, well, majority of the things have been said. I just want to request that I think it's high time we should not go with this antibiotic approach in which, one particular system, one particular curriculum is important, but you need to understand that the education requirement, the skill set requirement in rural Sindh would be much different from urban KPK, from very different in Galiat and very different in Shikarpur. So we need to have, it's really great to know that there is serious data accumulation exercise that is happening in the government, because unless and until we know what is the real state of affairs, we won't be able to formulate any kind of serious steps. And if that data is coming from the communities, from the schools, from the bottom of the pyramid, urban and rural, then I think we'll be in a great position to formulate a fantastic strategy at the center, and then actually disseminate it through either public-private partnership, outcome-based. Those are secondary things. But having access to the real data and then formulating our strategies on that is critical.
Thank you, Faraz. And just to summarize that, the key pillar which we picked up is there's an area which is moved on more demand-driven one. That's a key pillar for the strategy. Curriculum review in terms of the standardization as well as the content, what the education means in terms of the skill, in terms of the behavior, and in terms of the technical and vocational side. Teachers' capacity, like Assasa picked up, that's an important one, what they are exactly doing, what's happening there. And Khalid Saab came out with the narrative building. And from an execution side, the things which I picked up is the data validation. That's one side. Technology is another one. And public-private partnership, which is very much outcome-driven, like Zulfi Saab, you mentioned earlier as well, and Asad Saab built on. The one thing which is missing right now, we are talking about HRAC, the forum, because with the 18th Amendment, there is so complexity in terms of the execution, that who will make those decisions. I think that's a one area which we have to figure out, that what is the level where this activity should start. Ideally, if we don't have anything, it will start with the Prime Minister. And then from an execution perspective, we have to see how the departments should be engaged, involved, and effectively how we monitor that. The execution and monitoring is the last part. So from here, I'll thank all the panelists for
May I just touch base on 18th Amendment? If you,
I'm sorry, we've run out of time. I'd like to request.
No, I think just very briefly, I think this is a serious issue that through 18th Amendment, effectively, even the word education is not there in the federal list, education, health, and entire human development is provincial subject. I personally think that while it is good to devolve this and the province's execution, I'm not against 18th Amendment, but there should be some role in the federal government like that of at least planning and coordination and strategy formulation and taking a cohesive approach, taking the provinces together, so that should have been there. At the moment, I'm afraid that, the education department, which is there, or even the human resource department, it is not consistent with the constitution. There is nothing in the federal legislative list, part 1 or part 2. Even the word education is not there. They talk only about the standards and, very restricted sense.
Thank you
so I
very
think
much.
that's one of a challenge which we have to overcome, definitely. So thank you very much. I'll hand over to you.
Thank you. A big round of applause for our panel on developing a national HR strategy. I'd request the panel to stay on the stage. I would like to invite Senator Anwarul Haq Kakar to come onto the stage and present a token of appreciation to the panelists. If Asfar and Ali can also please join us on the stage. Thank you. Okay, I'm announcing the names in no particular order. Sayyid Zulfikar Abbas Bukhari. Andaleep Abbas. Khalid Awan. Sayyid Asad Ali Shah. Faraz Khan. And our moderator, Sajid Aslam. If all of you can now gather round for a group photograph, please. Okay. Thank you very much. A big round of applause for our panelists, please.